Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the studio. You're tuning in to episode 6 of Module 1 of the Blueprint for Effortless English. I'm your co-host, Ben.
And I'm Anna. Welcome back, everyone. We're so incredibly thrilled to have you here with us today.
We've officially crossed the halfway mark of this first module. We call this module the mental shift because everything we do here is about rewiring the fundamental way you interact with the English language. We've already covered the translation trap, thinking in phrasal blocks, the labeling method, stopping the habit of overcorrecting, and embracing the speed of sound over logic.
Before we dive into today's amazing topic, we'd love to ask our listeners for a quick favor. If you're enjoying our Chatcast and finding these lessons valuable for your English journey, please hit the like button on this episode and subscribe to the English Chatcast channel.
Absolutely. Liking the episode and subscribing to the channel is the best way to ensure that we can continue bringing you this high-quality content all the way through our 50-episode journey.
It really does help us build this wonderful community. Now, Ben, today we're stepping into the second half of Module 1, and the topic is how to build mental bridges to make that mental shift happen. This is one of my absolute favorite concepts in the entire Blueprint program.
It's a total game changer. Up until this point in the module, we've been doing a lot of demolition work. We told you to destroy the habit of translating. We told you to break down the walls of perfectionism. We told you to stop relying on the slow logic of grammar rules. Now that we've cleared the land, it's time to start building the new architecture of your English brain. And that architecture relies entirely on mental bridges.
Let's define what a mental bridge actually is. In a traditional language classroom, you're taught to build a bridge between an English word and a word in your native language. If you want to learn the word apple, the teacher tells you the word apple and then immediately gives you the translation in your mother tongue. That's a translation bridge.
And as we discussed in episode 1, that translation bridge is exactly what gets you trapped. It forces your brain to take the long, slow, scenic route every single time you want to speak. You have an idea, you walk across the bridge to your native language, you find the word, you walk across the bridge back to English, and then you finally speak. By the time you do all of that, the conversation has already moved on without you.
Exactly. So we need to demolish the translation bridge, but your brain still needs a way to store and retrieve that new English vocabulary. You can't just float words in empty space. They need to be connected to something. That's where the mental bridge comes in. A mental bridge is a direct connection between an English phrase and an image, a feeling, a memory, or an action, completely bypassing your native language.
It's about connecting the language directly to reality. Let's use a very simple example to illustrate this. Imagine you're trying to learn the word exhausted. A traditional student writes the word exhausted on a flashcard and writes the direct translation on the back. A Blueprint student does something entirely different.
A Blueprint student builds a mental bridge. When they hear the word exhausted, they close their eyes and they picture themselves coming home from a terrible 14-hour day at work. They imagine the physical feeling of their muscles aching. They picture themselves collapsing onto the living room sofa, letting out a massive sigh and not having the energy to even take off their shoes. They connect the word exhausted to that heavy, draining physical sensation.
That's a perfect mental bridge. Notice what's missing from that process. Your native language is completely missing. You aren't thinking about the translation, you're feeling the word. You're experiencing the word in your mind.
And the science behind this is fascinating. Our brains aren't designed to remember abstract lists of vocabulary. Our brains are designed to remember survival information, spatial relationships, emotions, and stories. When you tie an English word to a strong emotion or a vivid visual image, you're tricking your brain into thinking that this word is vital, important information.
There's a famous saying in neuroscience: neurons that fire together, wire together. When you hear the word exhausted and you simultaneously visualize yourself collapsing on the sofa, those two networks in your brain fire at the same time. If you do that a few times, they wire together permanently. The word and the feeling become one single concept.
That's how native speakers process language. When I say the word apple, I don't see a definition in a dictionary. I instantly taste the sweetness. I hear the crunch. I see the color red or green. I have thousands of tiny mental bridges connected to that one single word. We want our listeners to start building those same dense networks for their English vocabulary.
So, how do we actually do this in practice? How do we build these mental bridges effectively? Let's break it down into a few practical steps. The first step is what I like to call hypervisualization.
Hypervisualization is crucial. Most people are too lazy with their imagination when they study. They see a new word like to stagger, which means to walk unsteadily. They might briefly picture someone walking funny and then they move on. That bridge is too weak. It'll collapse the next day.
To build a strong bridge of hypervisualization, you need to add details. If you're learning the verb to stagger, picture a specific person. Picture your best friend. Imagine it's freezing cold outside. There's ice everywhere on the sidewalk, and your best friend is carrying 3 heavy boxes stacked on top of each other. Picture them trying to walk across the ice, swaying left, swaying right, almost dropping the boxes, struggling to keep their balance. Make the image bright, colorful, and highly specific.
The more ridiculous and specific the image is, the stronger the mental bridge will be. The brain loves weird, unique imagery. Normal, boring things are easily forgotten. But if you picture your best friend staggering across the ice with heavy boxes while wearing a bright pink chicken suit, you'll literally never forget the word stagger for the rest of your life.
That's a great point. Absurdity is a fantastic tool for memory. The second step for building a mental bridge is emotional anchoring. We're actually going to dedicate a whole episode to emotional anchoring later in this module, but it's so important to touch on it here because it's the glue that holds the bridge together.
Emotions are like super glue for human memory. Think about your own life. You probably can't remember what you had for lunch 2 weeks ago on a random Tuesday, but I guarantee you can remember exactly what you were wearing and where you were standing during your first kiss, or during a moment when you were incredibly embarrassed.
Exactly. Emotion tells the brain to hit the save button. So when you're learning a new phrasal block, try to attach it to a real memory from your own life that carries a strong emotion. Let's take the phrase to be thrilled. Instead of just translating it to very happy, connect it to the moment you got your first job offer or the moment you held your child for the first time. Relive that feeling of your heart beating fast and your face breaking into a huge smile. And while you feel that emotion, say the phrase to be thrilled out loud.
You're literally programming your nervous system to respond to English sounds. That's the ultimate goal of the blueprint. We want English to live in your body, not just in your intellect.
The third step to building strong mental bridges is personalization. Your brain cares most about things that relate to you. If you're reading a textbook and you see a sentence like, "John commutes to the city by train," that's a boring, generic sentence. It has nothing to do with you. The bridge will be weak.
To personalize it, you have to bring the vocabulary into your own world. If you want to learn the word commute, think about your actual daily journey to work. Think about the specific bus you take or the specific highway you drive on. Think about the annoying traffic light that always turns red just as you approach it. Say to yourself, "My commute is driving me crazy today." Now the word belongs to you. It's part of your reality.
This ties perfectly into the labeling method we discussed in episode 3. When you put a sticky note on your bathroom mirror, you're forcing the English language to exist in your physical space. You're building a bridge between the word mirror and the physical glass you look into every morning to brush your teeth. The context is real.
Context is everything. Words don't exist in a vacuum. A brick is just a brick until you put it in a wall. A word is just a sound until you put it in a context. Let me tell you a story about a student of mine from a few years ago. Let's call him David. David was an intermediate learner, but he was completely stuck. He was stuck on the intermediate plateau.
The dreaded intermediate plateau. We've all been there.
It's the worst feeling. David had a great vocabulary on paper. If you gave him a multiple choice test, he'd score perfectly. But when he tried to speak, he'd stutter, freeze, and constantly look up at the ceiling trying to remember the right words. I realized his problem immediately. He had 0 mental bridges. He had thousands of English words, but they were all connected back to his native Spanish.
So every time he wanted to say a sentence, he had to do a massive mental calculation.
Exactly. So I banned him from using his bilingual dictionary. I told him he was only allowed to use a monolingual English dictionary, and even then, he could only use it as a last resort. For 2 weeks, his only homework was to take 10 new phrases a day and build deep, emotional, highly visual mental bridges for them.
How did he react to that?
He hated it for the first 3 days. He told me his brain felt tired. He said it was so much easier to just look at the translation. And I told him, yes, it's easier in the short term, but it's destroying your fluency in the long term. Building bridges requires more calories. It requires active imagination, but it pays off permanently.
What kind of bridges did he build?
He got very creative. He was struggling with the phrasal verb to put up with, which means to tolerate something annoying. I asked him what annoys him in his real life. He said his neighbor's dog barks constantly at 2 in the morning. So I told him to close his eyes and picture himself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, exhausted, while the dog barks outside. I told him to feel the frustration, clench his fists, and say out loud, "I can't put up with this dog anymore."
That's brilliant. You connected the abstract grammar of a phrasal verb to a highly emotional, sensory, and personal experience.
And it worked. The next week in our conversation class, we were talking about difficult situations at work. Without even hesitating, David said that he had to put up with a very rude client. He didn't translate it. He didn't look at the ceiling to search for the words. The phrase just popped out of his mouth instantly. He'd built the bridge, and the bridge carried the meaning straight to his lips.
That's the power of the speed of sound versus logic that we talked about in the last episode. When you have a strong mental bridge, the sound of the phrase instantly triggers the meaning. There's no logic required. There's no processing time. It's automatic.
Building mental bridges is also the secret to mastering difficult grammar. Grammar is essentially just a system of abstract rules, and human brains are notoriously bad at remembering abstract rules while under the pressure of a real conversation.
This is so true. Try thinking about the rules for the present perfect continuous tense while you're on a first date or in a stressful job interview. Your brain will just shut down.
Exactly. But if you build mental bridges for the grammar, it stops being a rule and starts being a feeling. For example, the present perfect continuous is often used to describe an action that started in the past and is still happening now, and you want to emphasize the duration, like saying, "I've been waiting for 2 hours."
Instead of memorizing that complicated rule, you build a bridge. You picture yourself standing in the pouring rain at a bus stop. You're looking at your watch. You're shivering. You're angry. You feel the physical sensation of time dragging on, and you connect that whole miserable experience to the phrase, "I've been waiting."
Once you build that bridge, you never have to think about the grammar rule again. The next time you're frustrated by a long process, your brain will automatically reach for that structure because it's connected to the feeling of continuous frustration. You're using the grammar based on how it feels, not based on what the textbook says.
I want to touch on something very important here. Building these bridges takes time. It's a deliberate practice. You can't just listen to an English podcast passively and expect these deep connections to form on their own. You have to be the active architect of your own mind.
Yes, passive listening is great for rhythm and melody, but for vocabulary and complex phrasal blocks, you need active engagement. When you encounter a new phrase that you want to own, you must stop what you're doing, close your eyes, and take 30 seconds to build the bridge.
It feels like a lot of work for just one phrase, but think about the return on investment. If you spend 30 seconds building a solid bridge today, you'll have instant, effortless access to that phrase for the rest of your life.
Compare that to the traditional method. You quickly translate the word, you forget it the next day. You look it up again, you forget it again, and you repeat this cycle of frustration for years. Building mental bridges is actually the ultimate shortcut, even though it requires a bit more focus in the beginning.
It's like building a real physical bridge. It takes a long time to pour the concrete, lay the steel, and construct the suspension cables. But once the bridge is built, millions of cars can drive across it smoothly and effortlessly for decades.
That's a beautiful analogy, Ben. And speaking of analogies, the way you connect these ideas is entirely up to you. There's no wrong way to build a mental bridge as long as it doesn't involve your native language.
Right. Some people are highly visual. They need to see the colors and the shapes in their mind. Other people are more auditory. They need to imagine the sounds associated with the word. Some people are kinesthetic. They need to actually move their hands or their bodies while they learn the phrase.
I highly recommend combining the physical body with the mental bridge. If you're learning the word to sprint, don't just sit still in your chair. Stand up, pump your arms like you're running, breathe heavily, and say the word sprint. Tie the English vocabulary to the muscle memory in your physical body.
Physical movement is an incredible memory enhancer. Actors use this technique all the time to memorize massive scripts. They tie their lines of dialogue to their movements on the stage. When they walk to the window, the physical act of walking triggers the memory of the next sentence. You can do the exact same thing with English.
We've covered so much ground today. The concept of the mental bridge is truly the core machinery behind effortless fluency. When you stop translating and start connecting English directly to your life, everything changes.
You stop feeling like an outsider trying to decode a secret message. You start feeling like an owner of the language. The words become your tools.
Which brings us to your mission for this week. Your homework for episode 6 is to become a bridge builder. We want you to take full control of your vocabulary.
Here's what you need to do. I want you to choose one English word or phrase that you constantly forget. We all have those words, the ones that just refuse to stick in your brain.
Pick your hardest word. Then, I want you to spend 2 full minutes building the most ridiculous, emotional, highly specific mental bridge you can possibly imagine for that word. Use the hyper-visualization technique. Make it funny, make it personal, connect it to a real memory.
Once you've built your bridge, go down into the comments section of this episode and describe your mental bridge to us in English. Tell us the word and then paint a picture for us of how you connected it to your reality.
We love reading these, seeing the creative and sometimes crazy ways our listeners connect with vocabulary is the best part of our week. And by sharing your mental bridges in the comments, you might actually help another student remember that exact same word.
It's all about community. We're building this new English architecture together. Read what other people are doing. Get inspired by their visual imagery. Steal their bridges if they work for you.
We'll be down in the comments reading your vivid descriptions and highlighting our absolute favorites. Don't be afraid to be weird. The weirder the bridge, the better the memory.
This concludes episode 6 of The Mental Shift. You now have the blueprints for how to construct permanent vocabulary.
In our next episode, episode 7, we're going to talk about a concept that will relieve a massive amount of pressure from your shoulders. We're going to discuss the good enough rule and why striving for perfection is actually slowing you down.
It's going to be a fantastic discussion about setting realistic standards and keeping the momentum alive in your conversations. You won't want to miss it.
Until then, keep building those bridges, keep visualizing, keep bringing English into your physical world. You're doing amazing work, and we're so incredibly proud of the progress you're making in this first module.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Anna. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments about the Chatcast. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep practicing, keep listening, and remember, learning English with us is
a piece of cake. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time on the English Chatcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the studio. You are tuning in to episode 7 of Module 1 of the Blueprint for Effortless English. I'm your co-host, Ben.
And I'm Anna. Welcome back, everyone. We're so incredibly happy to have you here with us today.
We're moving right along through the second half of this first module. We call this module the mental shift because everything we discuss here is designed to completely rewire the fundamental way you interact with the English language. We've already covered the translation trap, thinking in phrasal blocks, the labeling method, stopping the habit of overcorrecting, trusting the speed of sound, and last time, building mental bridges.
Before we dive into today's topic, we'd love to ask our listeners for a quick favor. If you're enjoying our Chatcast and finding these lessons valuable for your fluency, please hit the like button on this episode and subscribe to the English Chatcast channel.
Absolutely. Liking the episode and subscribing is the best way to ensure that we can continue bringing you this high-quality content all the way through our 50-episode journey.
It really does help us build this wonderful community. Now, Ben, today we're tackling episode 7, and the topic is the good enough rule. This is a concept that I think is going to lift a massive weight off the shoulders of almost everyone listening right now.
I completely agree. It's a huge relief. Up until this point, we've talked a lot about the mechanics of language. We've talked about how to store vocabulary and how to connect sounds to reality. But today, we're talking about standard of performance. We're talking about the expectations you put on yourself when you open your mouth to speak English.
And for most English learners, those expectations are punishingly high. Traditional education systems have trained us to believe that language is a test. In a traditional classroom, if you get 100% on a grammar test, you get an A. If you get an 80%, you get a B or a C. You are taught that missing a single article or using the wrong preposition means your English is flawed or broken.
That classroom mindset creates a generation of perfectionists. It creates students who would rather stay completely silent than say a sentence that might have a tiny grammatical error in it. They wait, and they calculate in their heads trying to construct the absolute perfect, flawless masterpiece of a sentence.
And what happens when they finally finish building that perfect sentence in their head?
The conversation has already moved on to a completely different topic. They missed their chance. They missed the connection. all because they were afraid that what they had to say wasn't perfect. That is the tragedy of perfectionism in language learning. It steals your voice.
Exactly. So today, we're introducing the good enough rule. The good enough rule states that in spoken communication, the goal is not grammatical perfection. The goal is the successful transfer of an idea from your brain to the listener's brain. If the listener understands your idea without extreme strain, your English was perfectly good enough.
I love that definition. If the message is received, the language was perfect. Let's really break this down because it sounds simple, but it's actually a profound shift in how you operate in the real world. Think about conversation not as an academic exam, but as a game of catch.
A game of catch? Like throwing a baseball back and forth?
Exactly. If we are playing catch, my only goal is to get the ball into your glove. It doesn't matter if I throw it with perfect major league pitching form. It doesn't matter if the ball spins beautifully in the air. If I throw the ball slightly underhand or if it wobbles a bit, but it still lands safely in your glove and you catch it, the throw was a success.
That's a brilliant analogy. The perfect throw is just vanity. The successful throw is what keeps the game going. When you're speaking English, your ideas are the baseball. When you stress over the perfect verb tense or the exact sophisticated vocabulary word, you're stressing over the spin of the ball. The native speaker listening to you doesn't care about the spin, they just want to catch your idea.
Let's look at how this applies to vocabulary, because this is where students freeze the most. Let's say you want to tell a story about a time you were furious. Furious is a great descriptive word. But in the heat of the moment, under the pressure of a real conversation, your brain freezes. You can't remember the word furious. Your mental bridge for that specific word is temporarily blocked.
A perfectionist will stop talking. They will stand there, snapping their fingers, staring at the sky, saying, "Oh, what is the word? It means very angry. Oh, I know this word." They completely stop the momentum of the conversation to search their internal dictionary.
Right, but a student who uses the good enough rule simply bypasses the blockage. They realize they don't have the word furious, so they immediately grab a simpler phrasal block. They say, "I was really, really mad." Is it the most sophisticated vocabulary? No. Is it literature? No. But does the listener understand exactly how you felt? Yes, it is good enough.
This is a vital skill. We call it circumlocution, which is a fancy word for talking around a gap in your knowledge. The good enough rule gives you permission to be basic when you need to be. It gives you permission to use simple words to describe complex things, just to keep the conversation flowing.
Think about children learning their first language. Kids are the absolute masters of the good enough rule. If a child doesn't know the word for a lawnmower, they don't stop and panic. They just point out the window and say, "Look at the grass cutting machine," or "the loud grass car."
And the parent understands perfectly. We laugh because it's cute, but it's actually highly effective communication. The child successfully transferred the idea using the limited tools they had available. As adult language learners, we need to reclaim that childhood bravery. We need to be okay with saying the loud grass car instead of standing in silence, feeling ashamed that we forgot the word lawnmower.
I actually have a great personal example of this. A few years ago, I was traveling in a country where I barely spoke the language. I was at a restaurant and I really needed a napkin. I had studied the word for napkin before my trip, but in that moment, my mind was completely blank. I had a choice. I could sit there with dirty hands, or I could use the good enough rule.
What did you do?
I flagged down the waiter, pointed to my mouth, made a wiping motion with my hand, and used the basic words I did know. I literally said, "Please, paper for face."
Paper for face? That is amazing.
It felt ridiculous saying it, and my inner grammar teacher was screaming at me. But the waiter immediately smiled, nodded, and brought me a stack of napkins. The communication was 100% successful. My language was completely broken, but it was good enough to get the job done.
That is the essence of the blueprint. We want you to focus entirely on the result. The moment you accept that paper for face is a valid form of communication, your fluency will skyrocket. Because fluency isn't about knowing every word. Fluency is the ability to maintain the flow of communication using whatever blocks you have in your mental inventory.
Let's talk about how the good enough rule applies to grammar, because I know we have some listeners right now who are very nervous about making structural mistakes. They feel like if they use the simple past instead of the present perfect, the listener will be confused or judge them.
The truth is, native speakers are incredibly forgiving, and human brains are excellent at using context to figure out what you mean. Let's say you want to express that you started working at a company 5 years ago and you still work there now. The grammatically perfect way to say it is, I have been working here for 5 years.
That's a complex sentence structure. It requires a lot of processing power for a learner.
If you're in the middle of a fast-paced conversation and you can't assemble that present, perfect, continuous structure fast enough, the good enough rule says you should just simplify it. You can say, I started here 5 years ago, and I am still here. Or even simpler, I work here 5 years now.
If you say, I work here 5 years now, a strict English teacher will mark it with a red pen. They will tell you it's wrong. But what happens in the real world? In the real world, the native speaker you are talking to just nods and says, oh, wow, 5 years. That's a long time. Do you like your boss?
Exactly. The native speaker doesn't stop the conversation to correct your tense. They absorb the information and they continue the human interaction. They don't care about your grammar. They care about your story. When you realize that your audience is listening for meaning, not for mistakes, it removes so much anxiety.
And reducing anxiety is mathematically critical for fluency. In linguistics, there is a concept called the affective filter. Imagine there is a physical filter in your brain between your vocabulary storage and your mouth. When you are relaxed and having fun, the filter is wide open and words flow out easily. When you are anxious, nervous, or stressed about being perfect, that filter closes tight. Nothing can get through.
That's why you can practice English perfectly alone in your bedroom, but the moment you talk to a native speaker, you forget your own name. Your affective filter has closed because you put too much pressure on yourself.
The good enough rule is the ultimate tool for keeping that affective filter wide open. When you tell yourself, I don't need to be perfect today, I just need to be good enough to make this person understand me, your anxiety drops immediately. Your shoulders relax, you start breathing normally, and ironically, because you are relaxed, your grammar and vocabulary will actually be much better.
It's a beautiful paradox. By giving yourself permission to be messy and make mistakes, you actually make fewer mistakes because your brain isn't paralyzed by fear.
I want to share a mindset shift that helped a lot of my private clients. I tell them to stop comparing their spoken English to a textbook and start comparing it to how native speakers actually talk in casual settings. We have this illusion that native speakers speak in perfectly formatted grammatical paragraphs.
We absolutely do not. Native English is incredibly messy. We use filler words like like, and you know constantly. We start sentences, change our minds halfway through, and finish with a completely different thought. We break our own grammar rules all the time, especially when we are excited or emotional.
Right. If you transcribe a real, unscripted conversation between two native speakers, it looks like a total disaster on paper. It's full of fragments and run-on sentences. So why are you, as an English learner, holding yourself to a standard of academic perfection that not even native speakers follow in their daily lives?
It's completely unfair to yourself. You are trying to speak like a news anchor when you should be trying to speak like a person at a coffee shop.
The good enough rule also applies to pronunciation. We are going to have specific modules later in the course about rhythm and mouth mechanics, but right now I want to address the fear of having an accent. Many students believe they are failing unless they sound exactly like an American or a British person.
Your accent is part of your identity. It tells the story of where you came from. The goal of the blueprint is not to erase your accent. The goal is intelligibility. Intelligibility means that your pronunciation is clear enough that the listener doesn't have to struggle to understand the words.
If you have a strong Spanish or Japanese or German accent, but I can easily understand every word you are saying, your pronunciation is good enough. You don't need to spend hundreds of hours trying to make your R sound perfectly American if your current R sound gets the message across without causing confusion.
Obviously, if your pronunciation is causing actual miscommunication, like if you're saying the word ship but it sounds like a bad word, then yes, we need to fix that specific mechanical issue. But agonizing over microscopic vowel sounds when your overall speech is perfectly clear is just another form of perfectionism. It's a waste of your valuable energy.
Energy management is a huge part of this 50-episode journey. You only have so much mental energy to spend on English each day. If you spend 80% of your energy worrying about tiny grammar rules and perfect pronunciation, you only have 20% left for actual communication, connecting with people, and enjoying the language.
We want to flip that ratio. We want you to spend 20% of your energy on the mechanics and 80% of your energy on the flow, the connection, and the fun. The good enough rule is what makes that flip possible.
Let's talk about the practical application of this rule. How do we actually train ourselves to accept good enough when we've been programmed for years to seek perfection? It requires a conscious change in your daily habits.
One great way to practice this is by intentionally limiting your time to think. When you are doing the shadowing exercises we talked about in episode 5, or when you are practicing out loud in your car, do not allow yourself to pause and search for a word.
That's a great exercise. If you are talking to yourself in the car about your plans for the weekend and you forget a word, you are not allowed to stop. You have to force yourself to talk around it. If you forget the word for hardware store, you have to instantly pivot and say, the place where I buy tools and wood. Force your brain to find the alternate route immediately.
It builds such incredible mental agility. It's like a muscle. The more you practice talking around your missing vocabulary, the faster your brain becomes at doing it in real time. Eventually, you won't even notice you forgot a word because you'll substitute it so smoothly that the listener just assumes that's how you meant to say it.
That is the highest level of conversational fluency, the ability to navigate roadblocks without ever hitting the brakes.
I remember a student who was terrified of business meetings. He was a very smart guy, but he felt like his English wasn't professional enough. He was constantly trying to use big, multi-syllable corporate buzzwords, and it was causing him to stutter and lose his confidence.
What advice did you give him?
I introduced him to the good enough rule. I told him that in business, clarity is far more important than sophistication. I challenged him to go into his next meeting and explain his project using the simplest, most basic vocabulary he possessed. I forbade him from using any complex jargon.
How did it go?
It was a revelation for him. He went in, used simple phrasal blocks, prioritized his message over his grammar, and for the first time, he commanded the room. People understood him perfectly. His colleagues asked him questions. He realized that his basic English was not a weakness, it was actually a strength because it was so clear and direct.
That is a perfect example. We often overcomplicate language because we want to sound intelligent, but true intelligence in communication is making complex ideas easy to understand. Simple, basic English delivered with confidence and flow will always sound better than complex English delivered with hesitation and fear.
This ties right back into the mental bridges from our last episode. If you have a strong mental bridge for a simple word like big, use it. Don't pause the conversation for 10 seconds trying to remember if you should say colossal or monumental. Just say big and keep the story moving. The momentum is the magic.
The momentum is the magic. I love that, Anna. That should be a poster on the wall of every English learner's bedroom.
It's so true, though. Momentum covers up a multitude of sins. If you are speaking with rhythm and flow, people will simply not notice your small errors. They are carried along by the current of your voice.
As we wrap up this discussion, I want to emphasize that the good enough rule is not an excuse to be lazy. We are not saying you shouldn't try to improve your vocabulary or your grammar over time. You should always be learning.
Exactly. It's about your performance mindset in the moment of speaking. When you are sitting at home, reading, listening to our Chatcast, building mental bridges, that is the time to acquire new, complex tools. That is your training time.
But when you are out in the world, standing in front of a real human being, training time is over. That is game time. And in game time, you use whatever tools you have in your belt right now to get the job done. You don't wish for better tools. You use the simple ones you have, and you use them with confidence.
That distinction is so important. Acquire complex language in your practice. Use good enough language in your performance.
This brings us to your mission for Episode 7. We want you to actively practice being imperfect this week. We want you to experience the freedom of the good enough mindset.
Here is your homework. Sometime this week, I want you to intentionally describe a complex object or situation using only beginner-level vocabulary. Find an object in your house, maybe a kitchen appliance or a piece of technology, and pretend you are explaining what it does to someone who doesn't know the exact word for it.
The big, cold metal box in the kitchen that keeps the milk safe.
Once you do that, we want you to come down into the comments of this episode and share your good enough description. Tell us the actual word you were describing, and then type out the simple, creative way you explained it.
We want to see a massive list of brilliant, funny, simple descriptions in the comments. Let's celebrate the fact that we can communicate anything with just a handful of basic words. Read what other listeners come up with. It's going to be a great exercise in mental agility for the whole community.
I am so looking forward to reading those. It's going to be like a giant game of riddles in the comments section.
It really is. By embracing this rule, you are taking a huge step forward in the mental shift. You are leaving the anxiety of the classroom behind, and you are stepping into the practical, messy, beautiful reality of human conversation.
You are doing incredible work. Reaching Episode 7 means you have dedication. You are absorbing these new concepts, and you are building a completely new foundation for your English.
In our next episode, Episode 8, we are going to talk about visualizing scenarios. We are going to show you how to use your imagination as a flight simulator for real-world English conversations so you are always prepared for whatever comes your way.
That is going to be a fun one. It builds perfectly on the mental bridges we've been constructing.
It absolutely does. But for today, just remember to give yourself grace. Remember that your English doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful. It just needs to be good enough to connect you with the world.
I'm Anna.
And I'm Ben.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments about the Chatcast. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep practicing, keep listening, and remember, learning English with us is
a piece of cake. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time on the English Chatcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Chatcast. You're tuning in to Episode 8 of Module 1 of the Blueprint for Effortless English. I'm your co-host, Ben.
And I'm Anna. It's so good to be here with you today for what I think is one of the most powerful tools in our entire 50-episode journey.
We're really getting into the heart of the mental shift now. If you've been following along, you've already demolished the translation trap, started thinking in phrasal blocks, labeled your world, stopped your inner critic, trusted the speed of sound, built mental bridges, and embraced the good enough rule.
Before we get into the details of today's lesson, we'd love to ask a small favor from all of you. If you're finding this course helpful and you're starting to feel that shift in your English brain, please hit the like button and subscribe to the English Chatcast channel.
It really helps us reach more learners like you and ensures we can keep providing this content for all 5 modules. Now, today's topic is visualizing scenarios. We often talk about English as a skill, like playing an instrument or a sport. And today, we're going to use a technique that the world's best athletes and performers use every single day.
Exactly. We're going to show you how to use your imagination as a high-tech flight simulator for English conversations. This is how you prepare your brain for reality before reality even happens.
I love that analogy of the flight simulator. You wouldn't want a pilot to fly a massive jet for the first time without hundreds of hours in a simulator, right? They need to know exactly what buttons to press and what to say to air traffic control when things get bumpy.
And yet, most English learners walk into high-stakes conversations like job interviews, business presentations, or even just social parties with zero mental preparation. They just hope for the best, and then they're surprised when their brain freezes up under pressure.
The reason we freeze is that the brain perceives a real-life conversation in a foreign language as a threat. It's a social risk. When you're stressed, your logic center shuts down, and you lose access to all those phrasal blocks we've been building.
But visualization changes the game. There's a fascinating piece of science behind this. Our brains actually have a hard time distinguishing between a vividly imagined event and a real one. When you visualize a conversation with enough detail, your brain creates neural pathways as if that conversation actually happened.
So when you finally walk into that cafe or that meeting room for real, your brain doesn't panic. It says, hey, I've been here before. I know this rhythm. I've already said these phrases.
It's about building familiarity. Today, we're going to break down exactly how to create these mental simulations. It's not just about thinking of a few words. It's about a deep sensory experience. Then, where should we start?
Let's start with the perspective. This is a mistake people often make. When they imagine a future event, they watch themselves like they're watching a movie. They see themselves from the outside. That's not what we want.
Right, you have to be in the body. You need to see the world through your own eyes in your imagination. This is called first-person visualization.
Exactly. If you're visualizing a job interview, you shouldn't be looking at yourself sitting in the chair. You should be looking at the person across the desk from you. You should see the texture of their suit, the pens on the table, and the way the light comes through the window.
The more detail you add, the more your brain believes it's real. We want to engage all the senses. What do you hear? Maybe it's the hum of an air conditioner or the sound of someone typing in the next room. What do you feel? Is the chair hard? Is the room a bit cold?
And most importantly, what do you feel emotionally? In your visualization, you need to practice feeling calm and centered. Don't just visualize the words, visualize the feeling of the words flowing out of your mouth effortlessly.
Let's walk through a basic scenario that almost everyone encounters: ordering at a busy, loud coffee shop. This is actually a very stressful situation for many learners because the speed is high and the background noise is loud.
Okay, let's build the simulation. Close your eyes for a second. You're standing in line. You can smell the roasted coffee beans. You hear the steam wand on the espresso machine. It's making a loud hissing sound. You're moving forward in line. You see the menu on the wall.
Hey there, what can I get for you today?
Now this is where the magic happens. In your mind, you don't translate. You just reach for a phrasal block. You see yourself smiling, feeling totally relaxed, and you say, "I'll take a medium latte to go, please."
See the barista nod. Hear them tell you the price. See yourself handing over your card. Imagine the feeling of the plastic card in your hand. Hear the beep of the machine.
Now here's the crucial part of the simulator. Imagine a small problem. Maybe they ask you a follow-up question you didn't expect, like, "Do you want any room for cream in that?"
If you're a perfectionist, that might scare you. But in our simulator, we practice the good enough rule. You don't panic, you just smile and say, "No thanks, I'm good." Or, "Just a little bit, please."
You've just successfully navigated a roadblock in your mind. You've trained your brain that you can handle an unexpected turn in the conversation. When you do this 5 or 10 times in your head before you ever go to the coffee shop, the actual interaction feels like a replay of a movie you've already seen.
It removes the element of surprise, and surprise is the enemy of fluency. When we're surprised, we default back to our native language, or we freeze. Visualization removes that shock.
Now let's move to something higher stakes. Let's talk about a professional scenario, like a business meeting or a presentation. This is where the mental simulation is truly life-saving.
For a meeting, you want to visualize the room and the people involved. If you know who's going to be there, picture their faces. Imagine the seating arrangement.
And don't just visualize your own lines. That's a common trap. People memorize a script, and then when someone interrupts them, they're totally lost.
A good simulator includes the interruptions. Visualize a colleague saying, "Wait, can you explain that point again?" Or, "I'm not sure I agree with those numbers."
In your mind, see yourself taking a calm breath. Don't visualize yourself getting defensive or nervous. See yourself nodding and saying, "That's a fair point. Let me break that down a bit more."
You're practicing the mental bridge between a challenge and a calm response. You're wiring your brain to stay in the English flow, even when things get difficult.
I've used this many times in my own life when I had to speak in public. I would spend 20 minutes the night before just sitting in a quiet room, seeing the audience, hearing the murmurs before I started, and feeling the weight of the microphone in my hand.
It's so effective. By the time I actually stood on the stage, I felt like I was doing it for the 10th time that week. My heart rate stayed low, and my words came out much more naturally.
We should talk about social scenarios too. For a lot of our listeners, small talk at a party or a dinner is actually more terrifying than a business meeting. In a meeting, there's a clear topic. At a party, anything can happen.
Small talk is the ultimate test of the mental shift. It's where the speed of sound and phrasal blocks really matter. To visualize a social scenario, imagine the environment. Is there music playing? Are people laughing?
Imagine someone walking up to you with a drink in their hand. They smile and say, "So, how do you know the host?"
In your mind, Don't search for a grammar rule. Just see yourself responding with a block. Oh, we went to university together. How about you?
Notice how Anna included a question at the end. That's part of the simulation. You're not just simulating an answer, you're simulating a connection. You're practicing the back and forth rhythm.
Visualize the conversation moving from boring topics like the weather to something more interesting. Practice the transition phrases, things like, "That reminds me of a story," or "Have you ever been to that new restaurant downtown?"
When you visualize these transitions, you're building bridges between different topics. You're making your mental map of the conversation much larger.
I think it's also important to mention that you can visualize the negative things too, but you must visualize yourself handling them well.
That's a key distinction. We're not visualizing a perfect world where everyone speaks slowly and clearly just for you.
Exactly. Visualize someone speaking very fast with an accent you've never heard before. See yourself not panicking. See yourself using a good enough block like, "Sorry, could you say that one more time?" or "I didn't quite catch that."
By practicing the recovery in your mind, you remove the fear of the mistake. You realize that even if you don't understand something, the world doesn't end. You have a tool to fix it.
This technique is especially powerful for the shadowing sprint we talked about in episode 5. Before you even start the audio, take 30 seconds to visualize yourself as a mirror. Visualize the sound waves coming from the speaker and moving through you without any logic or analysis getting in the way.
You're setting your brain to the right frequency before you even hit play.
So, how often should our listeners be doing this? Is it a once-a-week thing?
I'd say it should be a daily habit. It only takes 5 minutes. You can do it while you're brushing your teeth, while you're on the bus, or just before you go to sleep.
Just 5 minutes of high-intensity mental simulation can save you hours of frustration in real life. It's the most efficient form of practice there is.
Think of it as a daily maintenance for your mental architecture. You're checking the bridges, you're testing the simulator, and you're making sure all the phrasal blocks are easy to find.
I want to talk about something Ben mentioned earlier, which is the idea of the invisible audience.
Right. Sometimes even when we're alone, we feel judged. We feel like there's an imaginary teacher watching us and waiting for us to make a mistake.
Visualization is the way to fire that teacher. In your mind, replace that judgmental audience with a room full of people who are cheering for you. Imagine a crowd of native speakers who are just excited to hear your ideas.
See them leaning in, interested in what you have to say. Hear them laughing at your jokes. See them nodding in agreement.
When you change the emotional tone of your mental simulator, your real-world performance changes. You start to associate English with connection and success, rather than judgment and failure.
This ties back to what we said in the first episode. English is not a subject you study. It's a tool you use to build a life. Visualization helps you see that life before it arrives.
It's also a great way to stay motivated during this 50-episode marathon. Reaching fluency takes time. Sometimes it feels like the goal is very far away.
But when you visualize your future self, the version of you that is totally fluent, confident, and effortless, you bring that goal into the present. You can feel what it's like to be that person today.
Visualize yourself standing in a boardroom, commanding the room in English. Visualize yourself at a wedding in London, making friends and laughing late into the night. Visualize yourself traveling across America, feeling completely at home in every conversation.
When that vision is clear, the work we do in these episodes doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like you're just building the path to that version of yourself.
I've seen students' lives change just from this one habit. They go from being the person who hides in the corner to the person who initiates the conversation. And the only thing that changed was their mental preparation.
It's because they've already had the conversation 100 times in the simulator. The fear is gone.
Let's talk about the specific mission for Episode 8. We want our listeners to start building their first professional-grade mental simulation this week.
This is your mission. I want you to identify one specific conversation you know you're going to have in the next 7 days. It could be a meeting, a phone call, or just talking to a neighbor.
It doesn't have to be a big, scary event. It just has to be a real one.
Once you've identified the scenario, I want you to spend 5 minutes every single day visualizing it. Remember the rules: first-person perspective, all 5 senses, and a calm, centered emotional state.
See the environment. Hear the background noise. Reach for your phrasal blocks. And most importantly, see yourself succeeding. See the other person understanding you and responding positively.
If your brain tries to show you a mistake or a moment of panic, that's okay. Just hit the reset button in your mind and try the scene again. This is a simulator. You're allowed to crash and start over as many times as you need.
Once you've done this for a few days, we want you to come into the comments and tell us about the scenario you're preparing for. Describe the environment you're visualizing. Tell us one phrasal block you've practiced using in that specific situation.
We love reading these descriptions because they help other learners see how many different ways there are to use English. Your simulation might give someone else a great idea for their own practice.
And then, after the real conversation happens, come back and tell us how it felt. Did it feel like a replay? Did you feel more prepared?
Most people are shocked by how much more relaxed they feel. It's like having a secret weapon.
It's not a secret anymore. We're giving the weapon to everyone in the Blueprint community.
This concludes Episode 8. You're now a mental architect and a flight simulator pilot.
You've got 2 more episodes left in this first module. You're so close to that first major milestone.
In the next episode, Episode 9, we're going to take this a step further. We're going to talk about emotional anchoring. We're going to show you how to lock in your best English states so you can trigger them whenever you need them.
It's like having a Fluency button you can press. It builds perfectly on the visualization work we did today.
It really does. But for now, get into your simulator. Build your world. See your success.
We're so proud of you for sticking with us. This mental shift is the hardest part, and you're doing it.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Anna. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments about the Chatcast. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep practicing, keep listening, and remember, learning English with us is
a piece of cake. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time on the English Chatcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Chatcast. You're tuning in to Episode 9 of Module 1 of the Blueprint for Effortless English. I'm your co-host, Ben.
And I'm Anna. Welcome back, everyone. We're so incredibly happy to be here with you today for what is going to be a truly transformative discussion.
We're nearing the very end of our first module, the mental shift. If you've been with us since Episode 1, you've already done a tremendous amount of heavy lifting. You've destroyed the translation trap. You've learned to think in phrasal blocks. You've labeled your world, and you've embraced the good enough rule.
In our last episode, we talked about using your imagination as a flight simulator to visualize scenarios before they happen. Today, we're taking that concept and adding the secret ingredient that makes it permanent. Today, we're talking about emotional anchoring.
Before we dive deeply into that, we want to ask our listeners for a quick favor. If you're enjoying this 50-episode journey and finding value in the Blueprint, please hit the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel.
It truly helps us reach more English learners around the world, and it ensures you never miss an episode as we move into the upcoming modules. Now, Ben, let's get right into emotional anchoring. What exactly are we talking about here?
To understand emotional anchoring, we have to look at how human memory actually works. In traditional English classes, we're taught to memorize things using mechanical repetition. You stare at a list of vocabulary words, you repeat them over and over, and you hope they stick in your brain.
And usually they don't stick, or if they do, they vanish the moment you actually need to use them in a real conversation.
Exactly. And the reason they vanish is because traditional studying is incredibly boring. It's a completely emotionless experience. Your brain is a highly efficient machine. It doesn't want to waste valuable energy remembering things that are boring or irrelevant to your survival. It simply deletes them.
But think about the memories in your life that you can recall perfectly. You remember your first kiss. You remember a time you were incredibly terrified, like almost getting into a car accident. You remember moments of intense, explosive laughter with your best friends.
You don't need flashcards to remember those events. You experienced them once, and they're burned into your hard drive forever. Why? Because those events were accompanied by a massive spike in emotion. Emotion is the superglue of human memory. When your brain feels a strong emotion, it essentially takes a permanent photograph of everything happening in that exact moment.
That permanent photograph is what we call an anchor. An emotional anchor is a link between a specific feeling and a specific word, phrase, or physical action. You already have thousands of emotional anchors in your native language.
Yes, you absolutely do. If I say a certain word to you in your native language, it might instantly make you feel nostalgic for your childhood. If I say another word, it might make you feel angry. The word itself is just a sound, but because it's anchored to a deep emotion, it carries power.
The problem for most adult English learners is that their English vocabulary has zero emotional power. Their words are just gray, boring data points stored in a dusty filing cabinet in their mind. When they try to speak, they're just retrieving data.
And retrieving data is slow. It feels robotic. But when you speak your native language, you aren't retrieving data. You're expressing feelings. The words are alive.
So, the goal of today's episode is to teach you how to bring your English to life. We're going to teach you how to intentionally create emotional anchors for your English vocabulary and, more importantly, for your English speaking state.
Let's start with the negative anchors, because we have to address the elephant in the room. Most English learners actually do have emotional anchors attached to the English language, but they're entirely negative.
This is so profoundly true and so incredibly sad. When many of our listeners open their mouths to speak English, they instantly feel a wave of anxiety, shame, or embarrassment.
Where does that come from? It comes from years of being corrected in classrooms. It comes from taking tests where every mistake was highlighted in bright red ink. It comes from the fear of sounding stupid in front of native speakers.
Every time you felt embarrassed when you mispronounced a word, your brain created a tiny negative anchor. Over the years, those tiny anchors build up into a massive chain that pulls you down every time you try to speak. Your brain now associates the English language with the emotion of fear.
And as we discussed previously, when your brain feels fear, it closes the affective filter. It locks the doors to your vocabulary storage. You freeze.
So before we can build positive anchors, we have to neutralize the negative ones. You have to consciously realize that the anxiety you feel isn't a reflection of your true ability. It's just an old, outdated emotional anchor firing off in your nervous system.
Just recognizing that fact is half the battle. When you feel your heart rate go up before a conversation, you can just tell yourself, "Oh, that's just my old classroom anxiety anchor firing. It isn't real. It's just a ghost from the past."
Once you acknowledge it, you can start overwriting it. You overwrite old negative anchors by intentionally creating new, powerful, positive anchors. This brings us to the practical application. How do we actually build a positive emotional anchor for English fluency?
Building an anchor requires 3 specific elements. First, you need an intense emotional state. Second, you need a specific trigger, which is usually a physical action. And third, you need repetition at the exact peak of the emotion.
Let's walk through a real-time exercise to show our listeners exactly how this works. I want everyone listening, whether you're driving, cooking, or sitting at your desk, to think of a memory in your life where you felt absolutely unstoppable.
Yes, think of a moment of pure confidence. Maybe it was a time you solved a massive problem at work and everyone congratulated you. Maybe it was a time you won a sports competition. Maybe it was the day you graduated from university.
Close your eyes and put yourself back in that exact moment. See what you saw, hear what you heard. Don't just think about the memory logically. You have to actually feel the pride, the strength, and the confidence rising in your chest right now.
Make the feeling bigger. Breathe the way you were breathing in that moment of victory. Stand up straight. Put a massive smile on your face. You're stepping into a peak emotional state.
Now, right as that feeling reaches its absolute maximum level, we're going to set the trigger. I want you to squeeze your right hand into a fist, just tight enough to feel the tension in your muscles.
Hold that fist while you feel the confidence. While you're holding that fist and feeling that incredible pride, I want you to say an English phrasal block out loud with absolute authority. Say, "I speak English effortlessly."
My English is powerful and clear.
Now release your fist and shake out your hands. Take a deep breath and let the feeling fade away. Return to your normal, neutral state.
What you just did was lay the foundation for a positive emotional anchor. You fired a specific physical trigger, which was clenching your fist, at the exact moment your nervous system was flooded with the emotion of confidence. And you tied it to the English language.
Now, if you only do that once, it won't be permanent. But if you do that exact exercise 10 times a day for a week, you're going to wire those neurons together permanently. The physical act of clenching your fist will become a button that instantly turns on your confidence.
That's the magic of emotional anchoring. You're essentially hacking your own nervous system.
Think about how you can use this in the real world. Let's go back to the flight simulator scenario from episode 8. Let's say you're sitting in the waiting room before a huge job interview in English. Your palms are sweating. Your old negative anxiety anchor is starting to pull you down.
If you don't have a tool to fight back, you're going to walk into that interview room feeling small and terrified. Your English is going to suffer. You're going to forget your phrasal blocks.
But you're a student of the blueprint. You have a tool. While you're sitting in that waiting room, you quietly squeeze your right hand into a fist.
Instantly, because you've done the repetitions at home, your brain recognizes the trigger. Your nervous system remembers the assignment. It releases a rush of that victory emotion. Your shoulders naturally drop. Your breathing slows down. The anxiety is pushed aside by a wave of manufactured confidence.
You walk into the interview room feeling like a champion. Your effective filter is wide open. The words flow out of you smoothly and naturally because you're speaking from a state of emotional power, not a state of fear.
This isn't just a psychological trick. This is neuro-linguistic programming. Professional public speakers do this before they walk out on stage in front of 10,000 people. Elite athletes do this before they take a penalty kick in the World Cup. They have physical triggers anchored to states of absolute focus and confidence.
You can have multiple anchors for different situations, too. The fist clench is great for confidence, but maybe you need an anchor for calmness.
That's a wonderful idea. Sometimes you don't need to feel like a champion. You just need to stop panicking. You can build a calmness anchor.
To build a calmness anchor, you would think of the most relaxing moment of your life. Maybe lying on a warm beach listening to the waves, or sitting by a fireplace with a cup of tea. You close your eyes, you bring that feeling of deep, warm relaxation into your body, and you set a different physical trigger.
For calmness, a great trigger is simply pressing your thumb and your index finger together gently. As you feel the profound peace of the beach, press those two fingers together and say a calm English phrase out loud. Say, "I have plenty of time," or "The words come to me easily."
Practice that calmness anchor every night before you go to sleep. Wire it deeply into your brain. Then, the next time you're in a loud, chaotic environment, like a noisy restaurant or a fast-paced group conversation, and you feel overwhelmed by the speed of the English around you, just press your thumb and index finger together under the table.
Your brain will instantly access that feeling of the warm beach. The chaos around you will seem to slow down. You'll be able to listen better, process the language faster, and respond without rushing.
We're giving you the remote control to your own emotional state. For too long, English learners have let the environment dictate how they feel. If the native speaker speaks too fast, the learner feels stupid. If the learner forgets a word, they feel embarrassed.
You have to stop being a victim of your environment. When you build emotional anchors, you decide how you're going to feel when you speak English. You take your power back.
Emotional anchoring also applies beautifully to vocabulary acquisition. We touched on this when we talked about mental bridges in episode 6, but it's worth exploring deeper here.
Yes, when you want to learn a difficult new vocabulary word, you must attach an emotion to it. The stronger the emotion, the fewer repetitions you need to memorize it.
Let's say you want to learn the word to scrutinize, which means to examine something very closely and critically. You could just write it on a flashcard and stare at it. It will take you 30 repetitions to remember it, and you'll probably still forget it next week.
Or you can use emotional anchoring. Close your eyes and imagine a completely ridiculous, highly emotional scenario. Imagine you're at the airport. You're running late for your flight. You hand your passport to the security officer. The officer looks at your passport, narrows his eyes, and starts to scrutinize it.
Oh no, the officer is staring at my passport. Holding a giant magnifying glass seems to have examined every single letter of my name. He looks at me, looks back at the passport, scrutinizing the photo. The sweat is forming on my forehead. I can feel it trickling down my temples. And this intense annoyance because I'm gonna miss my flight.
Scrutinize. The officer is scrutinizing my passport.
You've just glued that word to a high-stress emotional state. Because the brain prioritizes emotional memories for survival, you'll likely remember the word scrutinize after just that one single vivid imagination exercise.
The emotion acts as a chemical highlighter pen in your brain. It highlights the word and says, "This is important. Keep this forever."
You can use humor as an emotional anchor as well. Humor is actually one of the most effective anchors for language learning because it naturally lowers the affective filter.
Absolutely! If you can make yourself laugh while you're studying a new phrasal block,
you'll lock it in twice as fast. Imagine absurd situations. Imagine a dog wearing a business suit trying to order a coffee. Use your new vocabulary to describe that ridiculous image. The joy and amusement will anchor the words directly into your long-term memory.
This is why learning English through television comedies or funny podcasts is often so effective. You're absorbing the language while you're in a state of positive emotion. The language is slipping past your defenses and anchoring itself to your laughter.
But relying on external content to provide the emotion is a passive strategy. The blueprint is all about active architecture. We want you to be the one generating the emotion on demand.
That brings us to a very important concept. The state you learn in is the state you'll recall in.
This is a fundamental rule of psychology called state-dependent memory. If you study your English vocabulary while you're feeling tired, bored, and frustrated at your desk late at night, your brain anchors those words to the feeling of being tired, bored, and frustrated.
So what happens when you try to use those words in a real conversation when you're feeling energetic or anxious? You can't find them. Your brain hid those words in the tired and bored filing cabinet. You don't have access to them because your current emotional state doesn't match the state you learn them in.
This is why it's absolutely critical that you manage your emotional state before you practice your English. Never study when you're miserable.
If you sit down to do your shadowing sprint or your visualization exercises and you feel stressed out from your workday, don't start practicing right away. You'll just anchor your English to your workplace stress.
Instead, take 2 minutes to change your state. Put on your favorite upbeat song. Jump up and down. Smile until your cheeks hurt. Fire your confidence anchor. Get your energy up and flood your system with positivity.
Only when you're in a peak positive state should you begin your English practice. If you learn the language while feeling joyful, confident, and powerful, then joy, confidence, and power will naturally arise when you speak the language in the real world.
You're literally building a joy machine in your mind. Every time you speak English, it should trigger positive feelings, not negative ones. That's the ultimate goal of the mental shift.
So much of what we do in this module is about undoing the damage caused by traditional education. We're teaching you how to unlearn the fear and relearn the joy of communication.
It takes time, and it requires consistent effort. You have to be the guardian of your own mind. You have to catch yourself when you start sliding back into the old habits of self-criticism and anxiety, and immediately use your anchors to pull yourself back to confidence.
Which brings us to your mission for this week. This is one of my favorite homework assignments in the entire Blueprint program.
Your mission for Episode 9 is to build your primary confidence anchor. We want you to engineer your own personal button for instant English bravery.
Here's exactly what you need to do. Sometime today, find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed for 5 minutes. We want you to go through the exact process we described earlier.
First, identify your peak memory. Find that moment in your past where you felt absolutely invincible, proud, and powerful.
Second, step into the memory. Close your eyes, visualize it in the first person, and manufacture that emotion in your physical body right now. Make your heart beat a little faster. Feel the warmth of success.
Third, choose your physical trigger. It could be clenching your fist, touching your ring, pressing your fingers together, or even taking a sharp, deep breath. Choose something subtle that you can do in public without anyone noticing.
Fourth, at the absolute peak of the emotion, fire the trigger and speak an English phrase of power out loud. Say, "I am fluent," or "My voice is clear."
We want you to repeat this process at least 5 times today. Wire it in. Build the connection between the physical trigger, the emotion of confidence, and the English language.
Once you've built your anchor, we want you to come down to the comments section of this episode. Tell us what your physical trigger is and tell us the phrase of power you used. You don't have to share your private memory if you don't want to, but we want to hear about the mechanics of your anchor.
Reading about everyone's unique triggers is going to be fascinating. And by writing it down in the comments, you're making a public commitment to using this tool. You're solidifying your new mindset.
We'll be in the comments reading through your answers and celebrating your new anchors with you. This is a massive step forward in your journey.
It truly is. When you master your emotional state, the actual mechanics of English vocabulary and grammar become incredibly easy to absorb. You've removed the biggest roadblock to fluency.
This concludes Episode 9 of the Blueprint for Effortless English. We've covered an incredible amount of psychological ground today.
You're doing phenomenal work. You're just one episode away from completing Module 1.
In our next episode, Episode 10, we're going to do a comprehensive summary of everything we've learned so far. We're going to tie the translation trap, phrasal blocks, visualization, the good enough rule, and emotional anchoring all together into one cohesive, unstoppable mindset.
It's going to be a powerful review to make sure you have all the tools perfectly sharpened before we move on to the actual physical mechanics of speaking in Module 2.
You won't want to miss it. It's the grand finale of the mental shift.
Until then, keep building your anchors, keep managing your state, and keep bringing joy to your English practice.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Anna. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments about the Chatcast. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep practicing, keep listening, and remember, learning English with us is
a piece of cake. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time on the English Chatcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Chatcast. You are tuned in to Episode 10 of Module 1 of the Blueprint for Effortless English. I'm your co-host, Ben.
And I'm Anna. Welcome back, everyone. I have to say, I'm feeling a real sense of pride today. We've officially reached the end of our first module. This is a huge milestone for every single person listening.
It really is. 10 episodes ago, we set out on a journey called the mental shift. We told you back in Episode 1 that before we ever talked about the shape of your mouth or the rhythm of your sentences, we had to fix the way your brain interacts with the English language.
And we've done exactly that. We've spent these 10 episodes tearing down old, dusty academic walls and building a high-tech, efficient mental architecture in their place.
Before we do our grand summary of this new mindset, we'd love to ask a quick favor. If you've reached this 10th episode and you're feeling the transformation in your fluency, please hit that like button and subscribe to the English Chatcast channel.
It's the best way to support our community as we move into the next 4 modules and 50 episodes. Your support means we can keep this high-quality content coming all the way to the finish line.
Now, today is all about consolidation. We've covered 9 distinct concepts so far. To someone just joining us, that might sound like a lot to juggle. But today, we're going to show you how all of these concepts snap together like pieces of a puzzle to create what we call the new mindset.
I love that. It's not 10 separate things you have to remember, it's one single way of being. Let's look back at the foundation we built in the first 3 episodes. We started with the biggest enemy of all, the translation trap.
That was the heavy lifting. We identified that the habit of translating from your native language into English is the #1 cause of hesitation, fatigue, and errors. It's a middleman that steals your speed.
And we replaced that trap with thinking in phrasal blocks. Instead of seeing English as a collection of individual words that you have to glue together with grammar rules, we taught you to see it as a collection of pre-built Lego blocks.
That was such a pivotal shift. When you stop worrying about the individual words and start reaching for those blocks like, I was wondering if, or as far as I know, your brain suddenly has 80% less work to do.
And then we solidified that in episode 3 with the labeling method. We taught you to cut out your native language entirely by linking English sounds directly to physical reality. Instead of linking the English word apple to your native word for apple, you link the sound to the red, crunchy fruit itself.
Those 3 episodes created the core engine of your new English brain. You stop translating, you use blocks for speed, and you link those blocks to reality. That is the fundamental mechanics of the mental shift.
But as we know, having a good engine isn't enough if the driver is too scared to step on the gas. That's why we moved into the psychological barriers in the middle of the module.
Right. Episode 4 was all about the inner critic. We talked about how the habit of overcorrecting yourself in the middle of a sentence is like driving with one foot on the brake. It creates a stuttering, broken rhythm that makes it impossible to connect with the listener.
We gave you permission to be messy. We told you that your goal isn't to be a perfect textbook, it's to be a clear communicator.
And we followed that up with the speed of sound versus logic. We explained that English is a musical language, not a logical one. If you try to analyze the grammar while you're speaking, you'll miss the beat. You have to trust your ears more than your eyes.
That episode helped so many people understand why they can do grammar exercises perfectly but still struggle to speak. Speaking is a performance, not an exam.
Then, in episode 6, we introduced building mental bridges. This was the strategy for when things go wrong. We taught you that you don't need to know every word in the dictionary. You just need to know how to connect the blocks you already have to navigate around a gap in your knowledge.
I remember the example you used about the word furious. If you can't find that specific word, you just use a bridge and say, I was really, really mad. It's simple, it's effective, and it keeps the conversation moving.
Which led us directly into episode 7, the good enough rule. This is the ultimate philosophy of the blueprint. If the message is received from your brain to the listener's brain, the English was perfect.
That rule is a massive weight off the shoulders of every learner. It changes the definition of success. Success isn't an A+ on a test. Success is the waiter bringing you the right food, or your boss understanding your project update.
Then, in the last 2 episodes, we moved into the advanced psychological tools. Episode 8 was visualizing scenarios. We taught you how to use your imagination as a flight simulator.
That's a tool I use in my own life every day. By visualizing a conversation before it happens, you remove the element of surprise. You build neural pathways for success so that when the real moment arrives, your brain feels like it's just a replay.
And finally, in episode 9, we discussed emotional anchoring. We showed you how to glue your best states, confidence, calmness, and joy to the English language using physical triggers.
So when you look at all of that together, Ben, what is the new mindset? If you had to describe the person who has completed Module 1, who are they?
The person who has completed Module 1 is no longer an English student, they are an English user. That's the biggest shift. A student is someone who is trying to get something right. A user is someone who is trying to get something done.
I love that distinction. An English user is someone who walks into a room and doesn't care if they make a mistake with a preposition. They only care about connecting with the human being in front of them.
They are someone who has silenced their inner critic and trusted the music of the language. They are someone who sees roadblocks not as failures, but as opportunities to use a mental bridge. They are someone who manages their own emotional state instead of being a victim of their anxiety.
It's a feeling of total ownership. You aren't borrowing a language that belongs to someone else. You are using a tool that now belongs to you.
This new mindset is the foundation for everything that comes next. In Module 2, we are going to start talking about the physical shift. We are going to look at the mechanics of the mouth, the rhythm of the breath, and the actual physics of English sounds.
But the reason most pronunciation courses fail is that students try to learn physical mechanics while they still have a broken mindset. They try to learn the American R sound while they are still trapped in the translation trap. It's like trying to put a racing engine into a car that has no wheels.
Exactly. You can have the best pronunciation in the world, but if you are still translating in your head and overcorrecting every word, you will never be fluent.
But because our listeners have spent these 10 episodes building the wheels and the chassis, they are ready for the engine. They are ready to take these mental concepts and bring them out into the physical world.
I want to take a moment to address the listeners who might still be feeling a bit of doubt. Maybe you feel like you haven't mastered all 9 concepts yet. Maybe you still catch yourself translating sometimes, or you still feel a bit of that inner critic.
That is completely normal. Remember, we call this a journey for a reason. You don't master these things in 10 days, you begin to implement them. The fact that you are now aware of the translation trap is already 50% of the victory.
Right. Awareness is the first step of the mental shift. Every time you catch yourself translating and you consciously choose to reach for a phrasal block instead, you are winning. Every time you feel anxious and you fire your confidence anchor, you are rewiring your brain.
It's a process of gradual evolution. You are building a new habit, and habits take time to settle, but the foundation is there. You have the blueprint in your hand.
I think it's important to talk about the concept of effortless English one more time as we close out this module. People often misunderstand that word. They think effortless means you don't have to work.
That couldn't be further from the truth. We've worked very hard in these 10 episodes. We've asked our listeners to do deep mental exercises, to visualize, to label their houses, and to change their entire philosophy of communication.
Effortless does not describe the training. It describes the performance. Think about a world-class gymnast. When they are on the balance beam, they make it look effortless. They look like they are floating.
But that effortlessness is the result of thousands of hours of intense, focused effort in the gym. They worked so hard that the skill became part of their nervous system.
That's what we are doing here. We are doing the mental work now so that when you are in the middle of a real-life conversation 6 months from now, the English comes out of you without any conscious thought. It flows out of you as effortlessly as your native language does.
That is the promise of the blueprint. We aren't just giving you more information. We are giving you a new way to be.
So as we wrap up Module 1, what is the mission for Episode 10?
The mission for this final episode of the module is reflection and commitment. We want you to look back at the 9 concepts we've discussed.
I want you to find the one concept that felt like the biggest light bulb moment for you. Which one changed your perspective the most? Was it the labeling method? Was it the good enough rule?
Once you've identified that one concept, we want you to come down into the comments and tell us why. Tell the community how that specific shift has changed your English speaking this week.
And then I want you to make a commitment to yourself. Commit to staying the course for the next 4 modules. You have completed 20% of the journey. You have done the hardest part, which is starting and changing your mindset.
The momentum is with you now. Don't let it stop. We are so excited to see you in Module 2, where we take this new mindset and start applying it to the physical world of sound and rhythm.
I also want to remind everyone that if they feel they need to, they can go back and listen to any of these first 10 episodes again. Repetition is a powerful tool for the mental shift. Sometimes you hear something the second time that you missed the first time because your brain wasn't ready for it yet.
Absolutely. Think of these 10 episodes as your mental toolkit. You can return to them whenever you feel your inner critic getting too loud, or whenever you feel yourself falling back into the translation trap.
You are now officially a graduate of Module 1, the mental shift. Take a moment to appreciate that. You have done something that 99% of English learners never do. You have looked under the hood of your own mind.
You should be very proud of yourselves. We certainly are. The energy in this community is amazing, and we can't wait to continue this adventure with you.
In Episode 11, which is the start of Module 2, we are going to dive into the physical mechanics of English. We're going to talk about why your native language might be holding your mouth hostage and how to set it free.
It's going to be a fascinating shift from the brain to the body. It's the next logical step in your transformation.
But for today, just enjoy the new mindset. Walk out into the world today not as a student who is afraid of mistakes, but as a confident user of the English language.
Use your anchors. Trust the music. Embrace the good enough rule. And remember that the goal is always connection.
You are ready. You have the tools. You have the mindset. Now go out there and use it.
I'm Anna.
And I'm Ben.
If you enjoyed this first module, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with someone else who is struggling with their English. Let's grow this community together. Until next time, keep practicing, keep listening, and remember, learning English with us is
a piece of cake. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you in Module 2 on the English Chatcast.